Here's today's haiku. Smoke and scan shows life. 18 shootings in L.A. We need our police. This is Gene, and you're listening to Dumbasses Talking Politics. Hey, this is Gene, and soon you'll be joined with Dave, and then we can sit back and have a real discussion. I think it's going to be a fun night. But first off, I decided we need to talk about some of the things. Now, I had mentioned in my haiku about a YouTube channel called Smoke and Scan. Smoke and Scan is actually the title of a YouTube channel. And I've been listening to it since probably the riots. And what its essential premise is, it's about a pothead who listens to police scanners live. If he finds an issue, such as a high-speed chase, and he's from Los Angeles, so you know there are tons of high-speed chases there, he finds it live and plays it, and we all have a discussion about the high-speed chase and what's going on and other things in life. What's kind of cool about the channel is it's the first YouTube channel where I felt like actually having a discussion with the people, and I actually go in and I send text messages to them. So it's a lot of fun. He's really funny. I don't know what his name is, but he's really funny. The calls are entertaining, and his cat is an absolute nutbag. And when things are slow, he starts talking about his cat. He starts talking about just random things out there, like a stoner will do. He smokes weed on air, and he cusses like a sailor, so it's not for children or the squeamish. But there are some benefits to that. I will deal with those benefits. The first one is he's got a really interesting chyron at the bottom of his bottom of his live feeds, and those chyrons actually show the statistics for crimes that are actually happening. An example of that would be yesterday in a 24-hour period, there were 1,000 ADW, or assault with a deadly weapon assaults, and 300 stabbings. Just in the 2 hours that I watched, there were 18 shootings. Now, he only covers L.A. He covers the L.A. County area. L.A. Sheriff, L.A. Police, Highway Patrol, and Fire Department. So he only covers Los Angeles. So if you're from Minnesota, or I'm like from San Diego, you're not going to hear anything, but it still works out. It works out really well. It's a good show. And one of the things that, and even he says this, as stoned as he is, he said this last night, do we really want to cancel the police? We had 18 shootings tonight. We had 300 stabbings. They had 300 kidnappings yesterday. Is that, and those scanners were going off constantly. Police being called to a burglary, police being called to a robbery, police being called to an ADW. It was all online. And he sits and he understands the police codes. And he says, okay, there's a 415, there's a nut job, or there's a suicide, or there's an ADW. I think that it's a great show. It really is. If you can handle the stupidity of him being stoned all the time, it's fun. I actually like the show, and I love looking at the chyron at the bottom where you can see, okay, Los Angeles had 300 kidnappings yesterday. Wow. And that's not while he's covering it. That's for the entire day. The other set of stories I want to get through is about cancel culture, because it is in full swing. HBO Max has banned Gone with the Wind. Yes, the 1939 movie where the guy, Brett, I don't know what his name is. Clark Gable is the actor, but I never saw the movie, to be honest with you. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't all that excited to see it. But the 1939 movie, one of the first in color, actually, and he said, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. The first time they actually cussed in a movie too. That movie is now banned. Now, HBO has said that they're going to bring it back. They're just going to bring it back with disclaimers of historical context about this movie does not portray the real problems of slavery. Now, I may be way off here, but it was a movie and they probably weren't trying. The point of the movie was the love affair and the struggles against the Civil War. It really didn't have much to do with slavery. But, okay, if that's what they want to do. And what's really ironic about this, Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, was the first black person to win an Oscar from that movie. And I'm not going to play it here because we got limited time, but she gave one of the greatest speeches where she was talking about race because she was the first black woman to win an Oscar. And by the way, she was the first black woman to play on radio, too. So this woman has accomplished some stuff. And she basically said, this is what a black woman could accomplish in the United States. Really W.E.B. Du Bois of her. I don't even want to get into that. Well, people obviously were not really thrilled because they responded. Gone with the Wind in just today became the #1 ordered DVD on Amazon. So I guess people just like the movie and they're really afraid that just like what happens with guns when Obama took office and everyone started ordering a gun, people are worried that their favorite movies are going to get banned too. So they've decided to start ordering the movie over the internet to make sure they had a hard copy, a DVD copy of the movie. And by the way, Godfather, one of my favorite movies, uses the N-word all the time. I guess maybe that's going to be the next one they're going to go after. Maybe I need to order that one too. I'm sorry, I do have a hard copy of it. But it gets worse. Episodes of Cops and Live PD have been canceled. It is believed that these episodes don't reflect the true experiences of police. Well, actually they do. For some reason, the woke warriors seem to think that you cannot have an episode of Cops or Live PD where there is some black that is handcuffed and screaming, "Don't kill me," when the cop decides to shoot him 17 times in the back. They need that at least once in every episode. That doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen is because that doesn't happen. Reality is the cops have millions of interactions with the public per year. And none of these result in death or mass destruction. Most of the time, people deal with these people and that's it. Well, the woke police, no. You have to show what really happens, which means black police or white police kill everybody, I guess, even though only 9 people in 2019 were unarmed and killed for kind of questionable reasons. But it doesn't matter. So they got rid of those shows, which is going to kill my Saturday night, because I loved watching Live PD on Saturday night. And I didn't even know they brought back Cops. Apparently Cops was brought back in, 6 years ago. After, the show went from 1989 to about, I think it was 2009. Then they canceled it. And it was brought back again. It's been popular for another 6 years. But the woke police aren't even going after this. Now, mind you, I told you last week, the woke police, or it wasn't even the woke police, Lego said they were not going to do any advertising for Lego characters that imitated police characters. How stupid was that? Because our industry has to sit back and bow right now because there was one white cop who was apparently a really crappy cop killed somebody, and it's not enough that he's in jail and he's facing 20 years and he's facing 50 years, in prison. Now we got to cancel everything else. But the woke police went after Nickelodeon. An animated series called Paw Patrol must be banned. And Nickelodeon, or the producers of Paw Patrol, have decided to pull it. Oh my God. It's a cartoon. The dogs are wearing clothes. The animals are wearing clothes. They're not all cops. Some of them are firemen. Some of them are paramedics. Some of them are army people. I've never seen the show. It doesn't change my life at all. But they are being banned because we don't want to show kids that a police dog is a good thing. Awesome. The Paw Patrol Twitter account stated, quote, in solidarity of Amplify Melanated Voices, pound Amplify Melanated Voices, we will be muting our content. Muting! Big word there. Our content until June 7th to give access for black voices to be heard so we can continue to listen and further our learning. Pound amplify black voices. Muting. In other words, we've got to be censored, is essentially where this thing is coming from. I mean, wow. Just wow. And nobody sees anything wrong with this? What's happening in Seattle now, and it's actually happening throughout the country, is statues of Confederate leaders are now being torn down. Right at this moment, and today is Wednesday, it's 6:52 p.m. on a Wednesday, Antifa has started tearing down statues in Seattle of a Confederate leader in the middle of a square. Now, I was watching some of it. One of the statues actually got torn down and fell, and apparently it fell on somebody, which, too bad. But it just shows you. Here's the thing. There's a book called Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. And what that book is about is the book burnings of a tyrannical government like the Nazis. Antifa I know they're called anti-fascists, as Don Lemon wants to sit there and say. They're not anti-fascists. They're fascists. That's what Hitler did. Tearing down our statues, trying to eliminate that piss-poor part of history that we've had is not a good thing. We need to remember our history. We need to remember we had a civil war. We need to celebrate that the right side won in that civil war. It's really, really scary. And I just don't think it's a really great idea. And I think we're getting to the point. Remember I told you probably 100 podcasts ago, this is what a civil war is going to look like? Guess what? We're heading towards that civil war. Just think about it. And I know we're going to talk about it later. So, you've got my opinion for the first, got you through the basic news. Now let's bring on Dave. Dave, the Dave Rule, Dave. I won't call him the Dave Rule. He made a comment. I'm not going to mention it ever again, even though I'm going to try and keep everything to a half hour. But let's talk about it. He has been scratching his butt trying to get in on his little topic. So we're going to let him talk now. So Dave, say hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for having you. Yeah. Okay. This is not, the late night show. You can sit back and talk. This is normal. We're dumbasses. We're talking politics. Okay. So Dave, talk about the subject you want to go into.
I want to talk about the 75-year-old protester that was allegedly shoved by the police and the repercussions and what this gentleman, first name is Martin. I can't pronounce his last name, won't even try. what he was actually doing there and what led to all this.
So why don't you describe the situation? I'm sure everyone has seen the video by now if they've been on any type of social media.
All right. So there were police in riot gear. They were lined up. They had orders to clear a square. There were protesters. So obviously the police were there in force. They had their full riot gear. And the 75-year-old, older looking gentleman, obviously 75 years old, he is standing in front of the police line as they're yelling at him to back up and clear the area. There's absolutely no movement. There's no trying to get out of the way. He was there to protest, and he was basically not going to follow any of the commands that the police were giving. From the video, to me, it looks like two officers shoved him. He ends up falling, and he doesn't bend at the waist. His knees don't bend. He falls over like a board, stiff as a board. And you see on the video, he is laying on the concrete as a pool of blood starts to grow underneath his head. The police, obviously, they're in line. They move forward. Some of the police step over him. It's my understanding that an officer that was part of that riot crowd did bend over and try to examine him. And
It actually looked like he did call an ambulance too. He did call it in.
All right. I did read that that police officer that bent over was actually told or made to continue with the rest of the police and move the line forward. I did not see any of the aid that was rendered to him or any of that. Obviously, looking at the video, it's a short video, and reading a couple pieces of it, there's things that I question as to where the reporters got their story from, as to what orders were given, what the aid that was given. Last I heard, he was in critical condition, but that's something I want to talk about. The reaction of the 75-year-old, what he was doing there. Some of the things I disagree with. Obviously working in the profession that we do, you and I go through a lot of different training. Some of it relevant to what we do, some of it not. But one of the things that we go through being in California is we have to go through a lot of different trainings, a lot of regulations, a lot of how do you behave in front of someone that is a specific age or a certain age. They're all grouped differently. You look at pediatric patients that are newborn to a certain age. You look at teenagers and how they behave and how you talk to them. How you're supposed to talk to people that are middle aged, and then how you treat the elderly and people that are advancing in age. Their hearing is not as good. Their movement is not as good. Their balance is not as good. Obviously, 75-year-old.
So I've seen.
Go ahead.
I've seen the video. I saw it from beginning to end for however long they actually took the video. And I guess I'm going to have to do a show notes thing because I should put the video up there. I thought the video was rather disturbing simply because you saw him fall. And unlike President Trump, I believe he probably got hurt. I know that President Trump tweeted that he said that it was probably a setup. It could have been a setup, but no, I think he probably got hurt. The question I have for you, two police officers were put on administrative leave over this whole thing, pending an investigation. Do you think that's justified?
I don't. And the reason I don't is because they had given verbal commands. They had told the guy to back up. You know, who in their right mind challenges an entire police line in riot gear? You've got, you know, 15 cops standing in line with their shields and their helmets, and they're telling you to back up. Yeah, you back up. This is not the place to say, I am not going to listen to you.
So here's the other question, and I already know the answer because I saw the video, but I'm going to let you, because this is your topic. How many other protesters were in camera view?
I didn't see any in the camera view. They were all
there were none. That's why.
Yeah.
Why
he
not?
was standing by himself.
Yeah, he's standing by himself.
And he has every right to protest, peaceful protest. But the cops also come in and they have to look at safety and follow the rules follow the orders that they're given. They're told to clear their area, and there's a reason why. Maybe the crowd is getting agitated, too wild. So let's clear the area before they become they get to the point where they're going to start looting and being aggressive.
This I'm not sure about. Was it in New York or New Jersey? I think it was in New York, but I'm not sure.
It was two Buffalo police officers. So
okay, so it was in New York.
Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because Cuomo had a comment about it, and even Comrade Bill de Blasio had a comment about it. And I know Cuomo, who's been throwing police under the bus left and right, has basically, the police department. Well, let me let you finish the story, because what happened after those two cops were put on administrative leave?
So after those two cops were put on administrative leave, and they were told that the police would not back them up, would not pay for their defenses, would not do anything to help them, the rest of the group of police officers that were there, that were part of this riot prevention group, they all resigned their position within that group. They did not resign their position as police officers, but they resigned their position within the crowd control, riot control group that they belong to. The ones who carry the shield and the helmets and the batons.
I think there were 52 of them. There were a lot of them.
Yes. Initially, the story I heard was that they all resigned their position in support of those two officers. Later on, they came back and said, no, that's not really the case. The reason they resigned was because they did not have the support and backing of their department. And if you're a police officer, you expect to have backup. And if you don't have that backup, are you really going to do that job? And obviously, they feel very strongly about that. They have a strong union. They were basically left out to dry.
So you saw the video. I saw the video. Let's assume that this 75-year-old man did get knocked down. And by the way, was it a violent move? When you saw the video, I saw the video. I know what I think. Do you think it was really a violent move or a violent action by the police when they were trying to get this guy back?
It didn't look like it was a violent action. It was, the guy actually, watching the video, he actually walks up to the police. So he approached the police, and it's the video that I've seen is only a few 35, 40 seconds long. There's not much to it. It does show him, Martin, walking up to the police and starting a confrontation with the riot gear police.
Would it be anything comparable to what happened to George Floyd?
No, not, obviously he wasn't, held down. Um, George Floyd, it's my understanding, was on drugs, on multiple drugs, when he was arrested.
George Floyd also had a 220-pound man on his neck for 8.5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sure this could be a problem for second degree versus third degree murder. I'm not so sure that is a real justification for what happened to him, though.
There's no justification for it. I think what happened to George should never have happened. He was cuffed. They had him cuffed behind his hands behind his back. He had handcuffs on him. They had him sitting down. He was under control for a while. From what I've seen, the police had control when they relocated him. I don't know what happened. I haven't seen that part of the video where there's a struggle and the police actually
I never
get
saw
on
it
top
either.
of them.
I never saw it either. And there have been like 5 or 6. But let's go from George Floyd, because the thing is, I'm very, I think it's here's the thing. And Josie and I have had this, we've actually had drop down, drag out fights about George Floyd, because I said, George Floyd, no, he didn't deserve any of that, but that doesn't make it systemic proof of a systemic racism. I don't believe that. I think this guy was a jerk off, and he got what he deserved. And one of the things we got in an argument about is, well, he should get first degree murder. He's not getting first degree murder. He's not getting second degree murder. I think they overcharged him in Minnesota. I think that's going to be a problem they're going to have in Minnesota. But let's go back. I think one of the things I'm trying to get is that this guy, I don't know his name. I have no idea. I didn't pay that much attention to it. Matter of fact, I didn't even look at the video until you pointed it out, I think a couple days ago. So when this guy was pushed down, we could both agree this was not a George Floyd thing. This was not I don't think, looking at the video, I don't think this was an overstretch. I think the police are there to do a job. This guy was trying to, I don't know what this guy was doing. Do you think the cops could have done something different?
You know what? I don't know. Yes, they could have done something different. They could have grabbed him, turned him around, and cuffed him, as opposed to trying to shove him and clear him out of the area. Obviously, he's not listening to the commands that are given. I think that people have been emboldened to disrespect, antagonize, and see what they can get away with. With the police, there's absolutely no respect for the police. In the video I saw, I fully agree that he's allowed to protest, but he is also obligated to follow commands that a peace officer gives you. As long as it's not a command that goes against your safety, or something that's, you're told to do something illegal. You're told to vacate the area, you vacate the area. Plain and simple.
Okay, so I'm going to give my opinion. Here's the thing. I think the cops are screwed no matter what they do. They're hosed. I think if they had hooked him, that video was going to show the cruelty of the police. If they had just turned his ass around, put handcuffs on him, and arrested him like a common criminal, which technically he is at this point, it would have been the same video would have been on social media showing the cruelty of the cops for arresting a 75-year-old man. The way the media is making it sound like, they make him sound like, they picked the guy up and body slammed him to the ground. They didn't. And if you look at the police, when they pushed back crowds, they've done the same thing. They put their hand out and they kind of push them back. I did not even see a full extension of the arm. It's not like there was really a lot of force in it. The guy and the cops even said, well, I mean, he tripped over his feet and he fell straight backwards. I didn't see that, but honestly, the video is not exactly the best. I just don't see this as a big thing. And the cops walked by him because they didn't think twice about it. It looked like, and then there was one cop that said, this guy's not getting up, and they saw the blood. And then he started making the call. And that's another thing. There was a cop that saw that this guy was hurt and actually made a call. And by the way, let's not forget, this 75-year-old, he was a white guy. He wasn't a black guy. So right off the bat, the comparison of Black Lives Matter is completely thrown out the window. This is not even the same comparison here. This guy, I did not see one protester in front of that line, right in front of the cops. It was just him. And I did not see him step forward to the cops, but I think he probably did, thinking about it. I may have to look at the video again. But, I mean, if he stepped forward towards the cops, then their reaction is completely justified. They would have been jerks if they would have arrested him. I mean, who's going to know that this guy's going to fall like a board and hit his head? And it's not like they took their billy clubs and mace and just went off on him. They didn't. And I think you're right. I think that the police have been demonized to the point where I would consider this an accident, except this guy put himself in that position. I told my dad last week I was going to go to one of the protests. I wanted to go to one of the protests. Then I hurt my feet, so I ended up not going anywhere. And what did my dad say? Don't put yourself in that position. Yep. He goes, that's a bad idea. Don't put yourself in that position. Guess what I didn't do? Go to a protest. This is a 75-year-old man who should know better. That messing with the cops is probably not a good idea. Putting yourself in the situation is obviously violent. And this is like 3 days after half the city was burned down.
Correct.
And all he did was...
I think that if the cops would have arrested him, yes, there would have been a video about it. The thing is, if it bleeds, it leads. And it is being taken advantage of, and because it's so graphic, you turned a simple situation into a look at what they're doing. It's just another example of police brutality, and there's we've got to make changes. But
it's not a Black Lives Matter talking point. That violence that happened to that guy is not part of the narrative. It is not even a good look for Black Lives Matter. It means the police deal with what's in front of them. Because Black Lives Matter is literally saying white cops are going out there to kill black men. That's it. That's what they're saying. And this is not the case.
Yep. And you're not going to be able to prove that when you look at numbers. When you look at statistics, I think someone got in trouble for saying something up to the fact that you're more likely to get shot if you're white than if you're a black person. Look at the numbers. You look at the black population versus the white population, what they make up. and then you look at how many crimes are committed by those portions of the population, and then you look at how many people are actually killed by police.
I think that's what bothers me. I think what bothers me is they sit there back and say you are 20 times likely to be shot by a police officer if you're black than you're white. Now, we already know that's not true. We already know more white people are shot by police than blacks. Now, blacks who make up, I believe it's between 9 and 13% of the population. I'm not sure which it is. Yes, they are shot 20% of the time. It's higher than their population. But the question that no one answers, the Washington Post has great database on police shootings. The police shootings that were discussed by the Chicago Tribune was negative towards the Chicago PD, but the reality is it just proved the point that the question is, those who are shot, how many were in the commission of a crime? That's not discussed. So if, let's say, okay, 20% of the black population, which ends up being 20%, I think it's 1 million or something, they get shot by police. Of that 1 million, and let's just say it's 1 million, it's less than that, but let's just say it's 1 million. Of that 1 million, how many were actually committing a crime? But this is never discussed. I have a problem with that. Statistics, facts are never talked about with the media. We already know in 2019, 10 blacks were killed while unarmed. They always try to bring up Eric Gardner and that other guy over in St. Louis. I can't remember his name. Eric Gardner was committing a crime when he was arrested. And by the way, Eric Gardner wasn't beaten or killed by a cop. He had a heart attack. And Michael Brown in St. Louis, Michael Brown just robbed a store and was trying to steal a police officer's gun. They keep talking like these guys weren't committing crimes. They were committing crimes. And like in the case of Eric Gardner was committing a really low-level crime, I grant it. But first off, the police are still doing their job. He was committing a crime. You want to blame someone, blame the mayor of New York for making that a crime. And the police didn't kill him. He died of a heart attack. So it's not the same thing. And the fact of the matter is that they can sit back and they can name all these people that died in police custody shows you that we don't have systemic violence in the police department, because you can name everyone that it's happened to, and you're not naming everyone that's happened this year. You're naming everyone that's happened in the last 6 years. It just doesn't happen that often.
Do you know the name of a white person that was shot by a cop?
Yes, David. I can't remember his last name. Dave something. It was in a hotel in I think it was Arizona. He was shot by SWAT, and the guy was actually on the ground. He was drunk. He slept. His hands were behind his head. He was getting confused with the orders. And I believe I know I talked about this in a podcast. And he fell forward and they shot him. This was SWAT. Do I think that was racist? Well, no, the cops were white. And by the way, what happened to the cops? What happened to the 2 cops? One who shot him and one who was giving the orders. Because have you seen the video?
No, I have not.
Well, you got to go to my website. It's on the website. If you look at the website, you can see the video. There were 2 white cops. One was giving orders, and then there was the other one who shot him. And you could tell this guy did not know what was happening with the orders. He was getting confused. They basically told him, put your hands behind your head, interlock your fingers, cross your legs, and now crawl over here. And what happened was he fell forward, and then one of the cops shot him. He was already surrendered. He was done. My
Yeah.
question is, why didn't the cops just put him on the ground and then cuff him? It was done. It was the whole thing was finished. They shot him in cold blood. Nothing happened to the two cops. Nothing happened to the two cops. And police cam footage was all available.
I don't recall any riots.
None. Zero. Hey, what happened to Dave? Who's Dave Dorn?
Dave Dorn was a retired police officer who was a friend of a pawn shop owner, and he was working to protect the shop. Looters came in, and from my understanding, they shot him. There's a video of it where Dave Dorn actually crawls out of the shop, and you watch him die on the sidewalk.
And you see the desperation in his eyes. He knows he's going to die. And he's looking around. And the guy who was actually making the video was a nephew.
Wow.
By the way, what color was Dave Dorn?
Black.
Where are the protests?
They were in New York, I believe, and the people that shot him were also black.
Yeah. How many people were killed in Chicago last weekend?
I think it was over 40 people shot.
No. 84 were shot, or 80, 87 or 88 were shot. 24 were killed. And
Wow.
all of them that were shot were?
Black.
And who shot them?
Blacks.
Yep. Where's it Black Lives Matter?
Not there.
I don't know. I'm asking you. I have no idea. They weren't in Chicago.
Nope.
I just think it's really disturbing, because what is this whole thing about for me? It's about a narrative. And I believe this is about the presidential narrative that the left has to create, because Joe Biden is looking worse and worse and worse. And this racism narrative, and they've tried to blame Trump. Did you see any of the, I didn't see any of them. I watched them tonight. But did you see any of the congressional hearings today about George Floyd?
I did not, but I look forward to seeing him on your website.
You're probably not going to. They were really long. And I actually did. I only saw a little bit of it. I didn't see the whole thing. But the reality was, the Republicans brought in Dan Bongino, who used to be a New York City cop, and I've talked about him on my website, and a Secret Service, and a gal whose brother was killed in Oakland, standing guard for something, and he was black, and he was killed by rioters during the riot. And I can't even recall his name, because
no one's talking about it.
No one's talking about it. It just seems like violence it's out there, but no one's dealing with it. And here's the thing. Is there a problem? And I lied to you. I'm going to bring this up anyway. Is there a problem with the police?
I don't think the problem is the police. I think that they could go through more training. I think that some of the procedures that they go through, need to be changed. I know that they've talked about certain things, and don't mind the noise. I've got dogs running around here.
That's fine.
I know that they've changed procedures when it comes to high-speed chases, and they've realized, maybe what we're doing is causing, or has a potential of causing, more harm. So they will actually back away from high-speed chases. There's also the cases when there's a high-speed chase and they finally catch the guy. Their adrenaline is so high that they recognize that it's because their adrenaline is so high, it is usually going to be very aggressive takedowns, and there's the potential for making a lot of mistakes. And I think what's happened, and things are happening with all the protests and the video that we saw, yes, that should never have happened. But it's a being recognized as, you know what, maybe we need to change some of our protocols, some of our procedures, and something needs to happen to make it safer for both the cops and the civilians.
Is defunding? I won't even talk about the idiocy of eliminating the police. I don't even think that's an option. And listening to Smoke and Scan, I know it's not an option in Los Angeles. Do you think defunding the police is even an option?
I do not. I think the police do a lot. I've actually did a ride along with police. I think I've mentioned that before.
Not on a podcast, so go ahead.
All right, so I did a ride along with a sheriff, a canine sheriff, at night. Very interesting. There's a lot of times where you're sitting, you're observing. The officer I was with, obviously, he's following orders. He's listening to the radio, and it's kind of boring. And then get in the car, and you're doing 130 on the freeway. You're doing 130 on side streets, and adrenaline is pumping, and then back down to zero. And then 15, 20 minutes later, there you go again. Adrenaline's at 100%, and it's on or off. There's nothing in between. There's no ramp up. It's instant on, instant off. And it's one of those things. You're doing that day in and day out. It's very stressful. I did it just as a ride along. It was pretty exciting for me, but at the same time, I could see how it's a stressful job.
See, I just read I read a book about the representative who was a Navy SEAL, and he explained what he had to go through. I swear to God, I can never remember his name, which is a real insult to him because he's actually one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite representatives. Hold on, I got to look it up and give him a shout out right now. And I'm going to feel like an ass the second I look up his name, and there it is. Oh, where is it? Where is it? It was a really good book. I'm probably going to have to write a I'm probably going to have to write
Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw. Yes. Dan Crenshaw explained what he had to go through to become a Navy SEAL. And so he had to go through basic in the Navy. Then he had to go through his MOS training. Then he went through 6 months of, I can't remember what they called it, but he went through 6 months of absolute physical hell to become a SEAL. Then he failed once. Then he went again and he passed again. BUDS is what it's called. And then he spent another year in training. And then he said while he was in country, before he lost his eye, he was constantly being checked by psychologists. He was constantly being interviewed. And one of the things he had learned was to be able to be extremely detailed and know how to deal with a situation that you may not know how to deal with. I think that's one of the things our cops need. I think 18-year-olds is too young to be a cop. I think 6 months of training, not enough time to be a cop. LAPD, it's 6 months of training. You can do it right out of high school. I think that's insane. An 18-year-old is not ready to own a gun, not ready to drink, much less become a cop, have all that power, and not enough training to deal with somebody who's holding a shotgun at you. I think our cops need to be treated like special forces in the military. They need to have the same benefits. They need the same psychological testing. They need the same training on temperament. And I think when you have that kind of training, you can find out the bad eggs from the good eggs. But right now, you take a 6-month course and you become a cop. This is insane. And I don't agree with it. This guy was a cop this Chauvin was a cop for 19 years. He had been in trouble dozens of times. This guy should have never made it into the police department. And I think one of the problems is, I think not only do we not need to defund the cops, because that's stupid. We need cops. I think we need to put more money into the cops. And I think we need to have better training. And I think we have to have better evaluations. Now, one of the things I'm really on the ropes about, one is immunity. I think there is a level of immunity police should have. I don't think a cop is going to go out there if he could get sued from any gang member that decides to say that he was being abused. And then suddenly there's a lawsuit. I think that's asinine, which is what the Democrats want. The Republicans want limited immunity, which means with this Floyd case, those people should be able to sue the crap out of him. I have no problem. He's going to get hopefully he's going to get convicted. I'm not so sure now with that stupid upgrading of the charges. But the immunity is something that I'm kind of a little bit on. There's got to be a middle ground there. I'm just not sure what it is. But I think definitely training, and I think it should not be that easy to be a cop. Because let's face it, if you're in Chicago, more people were killed in Chicago in 2016 than were killed in Iraq. That tells me that's a war zone. And those people better be trained.
Yeah, I also think that as police officers, someone that has been on the force for as long as Chauvin was and had so many reports of misconduct, was he given a pass? Was he given a pass every time?
Sure, sounds like it.
Do all cops have that amount of write-ups against them? Or was he just a bad apple that skated through the system?
Well, I think that brings up another question, is the police unions. I don't believe because the police unions protect the police no matter what they do. That's what a policeman is paying union dues for. I think any public sector union is evil. I think the fire unions are evil, fire department unions, police department unions, teacher unions. All these unions are just bad news. And if a guy is effing up, a guy is effing up. And you need to get rid of him. This guy had, what was it, Dave? Was it 19 or 20?
I think it was 19 years of service.
And they were violent complaints.
Yeah. I think he had one per year.
Yeah, and they were violent complaints. There weren't, he treated me bad. He was beating people up. This guy had some problems. So I think he stayed in because of the unions. So I don't know.
Yeah, so also, I know I do not have multiple houses, but as a police officer, he did have multiple houses.
It's kind of interesting at a $60,000 a year job.
Yes. Obviously, different parts of the country. We're in California. Home prices here are ridiculously high. I can't afford half a house, the house I'm in, versus looking at even having multiple houses. He had multiple houses. When I heard that, I thought that was, that's very good for him. How could he afford it?
It's going to be interesting when the trial happens. I didn't know that. I did not know that. How a cop has multiple houses, unless the wife was rich, but the wife divorced him 5 minutes after he got arrested.
Yeah, that happened so fast. I thought this may be a ploy to protect assets. Hey, honey, if
Oh, I didn't think about that.
things are going to hit the fan, we're going to lose everything. In order for us to save our retirement, you're going to have to take possession of both houses, and we're going to have to get a divorce. If this thing blows over, we'll get back together and we'll continue where we left off. But if things go bad, we don't want to lose our retirement, our assets.
Oh, he's already been fired. He's lost his retirement.
Yes.
Or it could be that this guy was a violent jerk to begin with, and this was her opportunity to get away from him without any. And I didn't think about that. I didn't think about what you just said. I personally thought, well, he was obviously an ass. She left him the second he got arrested.
Immediately.
I just thought, okay, this guy's obviously got issues. That's going to come up in the trial.
Yes.
So it's not really advantageous. Now, granted, you're right. I mean, he gets a house, she gets a house, and then when they divorce, she keeps the house, and nothing else has to do with them. That makes sense. I didn't think about it, but I just thought when I heard that, this guy's really a jerk. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I thought about that. It's like, something so dramatic. Yeah, I wouldn't blame her for leaving. But then I heard, they had two houses, and she was taking possession of this and that. And I thought, wait a minute, they're juggling their finances, they're prepping. And back in my mind, I thought, what? Is this a divorce because the guy was a jerk and they're having problems, or is it a divorce of convenience or protection? So that they're able to keep something.
We're not going to know. We're not going to know until this whole thing's over. But the thing is, this guy's looking at 50 years in prison. Unless he thinks he's really going to get off. It's very possible he thinks he's going to get off.
I think it's within days of this happening, you're thinking, okay, I'm part of the police union. The police is going to support me. I think they fired me because, to save face. Maybe they'll be able to sweep things under the rug. Maybe after 2 weeks, this whole thing dies down. There's a lot of things that are probably going through through his head, right? His lawyers, his
he had 4 days to think about it. He had 4 days to think about it. He did. Yeah. So I don't know. Well, anyway, let's call it. Good conversation. So let me close this out. I've got to be careful not to play any music that goes against YouTube's licensing policy, because I'm looking at his dogs right now. You guys are not going to see this. This is a podcast. They're so small and worthless. How cute. Why don't you get like a pit bull?
Because I'd get sued if it bit someone.
Oh, yeah, it's true. So you can follow me at Runnin' Fool at RUNNINFEWL. You can download or listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podcast Addict, and because I'm not using any licensed material, YouTube. Any show notes, you can visit www.dumbassestalkingpolitics. There wasn't going to be any show notes, but I got a feeling I'm going to have to throw a couple of videos up there just so that everyone knows what we were talking about. This is Gene, and who are you?
And this is David.
You've listened to Dumbasses Talking Politics.